Hi, welcome to my show. I'm Lisa Saunders. I live in Mystic, and I have a new friend here, Pam Collins Fisk. Or do you like to be Pamela?
Pam.
Pam. Okay. Pam, I was so excited to meet you. We met when I was giving a writer's class on how to get published, I believe. And you're writing a very interesting book that we'll touch on later. But what I thought was exciting about you, on top of your story, which is phenomenal, Innkeeper's Diary, is the fact that you actually are an innkeeper. And you just opened a bed and breakfast in New London.
I did, Coastal Cottage Inn. We opened about 2.5 weeks ago, and we have been sold out almost every night.
That is really exciting. When I did a search through bedandbreakfast.com, I typed in New London. Yours is the only one that popped up.
It's because I'm the only one that's legal.
Well, we have images of your bed and breakfast that I'd love to show because it's very unusual, and I think it really reflects your personality, which is very, I don't know if you would use the word eclectic. So if we have the images, I'd love to see them, but until we get those up, I'd love to know, it's a Victorian on the outside, but what would you call the inside? Because you see, you have model ships in there, a suit of armor. You have a very old costume in your entryway. Who is that costume?
Well, you know, years ago, I was living in a little farmhouse, and my husband had just died, and my stepdaughter came over and she said, "You can color your world happy." And it dawned on me that my home was my world. And so I started coloring it happy. And instead of doing what was in Vogue or in Home magazine, I bought things that I liked. I painted colors that I liked. And what you see is who I am. So
it really is, like, because every corner in your bed and breakfast has a story, and you have a huge grand piano. And when you had your opening, that's where we met Connie, who I've had on my show. She's a fabulous
amazing.
Yeah. And you and your husband Marcus are just fabulous host and hostess. I can see why you do it.
Thank you.
How did you even get into doing a B&B?
I'd been living in Boston, and I was an executive assistant for a lot of CEOs. And I didn't like the corruption that I was seeing, and I was getting tired of shredding papers. And
wow.
Yeah, it's in the book.
Oh, wow.
And one day something happened at one of my offices, and I said, you know what, I can't live like this anymore. And I had just bought a 20-room inn in Hall, Massachusetts, and it was across the street from the ocean. And my sister had come to visit with her friends, and they said, why don't you make it an inn? So not knowing anything about how to make an inn, I went and bought Bed and Breakfast for Dummies. And
oh, they have such a book like that? Okay.
Yeah, Bed and Breakfast for Dummies, and how to start a bed and breakfast. And so I read the parts that I liked and disregarded the parts I didn't like the financial stuff and the accounting. I just
who figures that out for you then?
I wing it.
Okay.
God loves me. So I decorated it and I made it an inn, and then I thought, okay, now if I was going to start a bed and breakfast, how would I do it? And I typed in bed and breakfast, and then I thought, well, nobody knows about Hall, Massachusetts, but they do know about Boston. So I got a hold of the top bed and breakfast site and asked them about advertising there. And that's when they told me that I could do a second city listing. So I put Boston in there as my second city listing, which was one of the best things I ever did. So people would type in Boston and they would see me as a second listing.
Okay.
And then the next thing I know, I've got famous people staying at my house. I've got concert pianists. I've got scientists. I've got garbage truck drivers and their wives on their anniversary.
Wow.
I've got all kinds of people coming into my house.
You have a huge range, and I think that's what makes the parties I've been to at your house or where I've met the guests that come to your house just fun because first of all, you're a great host and hostess. You make everyone feel welcome, and you introduce people by saying something unique that's unique about them. So I feel like everyone's made to feel special at your house, and plus the stories behind your antiques and behind these unusual rugs that you have, stained glass windows from this is old house, and you know I just love your basement, which I call a speakeasy.
Well, we now have the code.
Oh yeah, is that the code?
Yeah, from the wedding.
All
from
right.
the wedding.
So if people want to get into your speakeasy,
No, only us. We're the only ones that get into the speaking. And Suzanne.
but you just have a unique imagination, and I think when I visited your home for the first time, because I hadn't really read your book, your manuscript, I'd only read just a teeny bit of it and reviews, which were phenomenal. That's coming out in the spring, right? Your book, Innkeeper's
Well, it was supposed to
Diary?
come out in the spring, but I found an amazing editor, and she did so much more to it that I was able to add more to it. Now it's going to go out in this, hopefully, this summer.
Oh, Suzanne, you had Suzanne.
Suzanne, yeah, because of things just.
She's a good editor.
She's an amazing woman. She was God sent. Of course, God's changed his name now
And
to
she
the
also
universe.
helps.
Yeah.
And she also helps us with the show. She's back there doing the hard work.
She's probably
of making sure the
smiling.
cameras are
Yeah,
still on
yeah.
us. But yeah, no, she helped me with my book, Mystic Seafarer's Trail. Helped me because there were so many topics, and I needed to pull them together into a theme. And she kind of helped me streamline it. And do you think she helped you do that?
Oh, God, yes.
Because you have so many stories that you tell me. Can you tell me a little bit about what your book is about?
Well, yeah, it's a memoir, and it's a collection of all my journals. But it's basically about a country girl who leaves a small town. Her husband is abusive, commits suicide, and she wants a better life for her children. So she moves. She finds, actually, her son starts having epileptic seizures, and he's allergic to all the medicine that's supposed to help it. So she hears of a monk who lives in Boston who's known to heal, and so she makes arrangements, takes her son, and miraculously the son is healed.
That's a wonderful
my
story.
son, yeah.
Yes, that's one. So this is what brought you to Boston?
That's what brought me to Boston.
Not to digress, but okay.
Yeah.
All right, so keep going. That's really interesting. Okay.
And so I ended up I decided to start a new life. And so the book is my journey from there, being a single mother, raising the boys. Then I started modeling because I've been doing that for a while, so that supplemented my income.
You started modeling before or after the bed and breakfast in Boston?
Way before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been modeling a long time.
Because
you're still modeling. I mean, you look gorgeous.
No, I am not still modeling.
I thought you did a fundraiser. Didn't you do a fundraiser?
Yeah,
when
but
you were
I was just helping the girls.
You were
I was
helping
teaching
the
them how to walk.
Well, that was a blast when I came to your bed and breakfast and you were giving us modeling
Oh, well,
lessons and how to turn. I couldn't do it without giggling the whole time because I didn't realize that there really is, when you walked across the floor versus me slumping across, and you did it so full of pizzazz.
Well, there's an art. I practiced in the basement a lot.
So you did this
before I
for the
did it.
Waterford Women's Club, right?
Yep.
You helped them do it, and you taught them all how to walk?
Yep, and they had a good time, and they did well.
Oh,
They
it was
did
fun. Like I said,
very
us
well.
gals just had fun, just trying out,
Yeah, it's
how to
fun.
walk. I can't remember which of our friends did the best with their little lesson.
I think Suzanne.
Yeah, she did a great
She
job.
had, yeah.
She did
she
actually.
had the hip thing going.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited we're going to talk also about your fashion, but to digress a little, I learned that when I went to your B&B and I saw that costume what period of that was that costume? Was that like?
The one at the door?
Yeah, late 1700s. I can't remember what you said.
Well, actually, my husband and I lived in Washington, and I worked at Mount Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband is an actor, as you know, sometimes, and he loves being in naval costumes. So we signed up for the George Washington Ball
Okay.
at Gadsby's Tavern, where George Washington used to hang out, and I needed a ball gown for it. So we were in...
Now, is this when you were working at Mount Vernon?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and you're a docent there. So you know a lot about Martha, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I know a little bit. A little bit. So I got the dress from San Juan, Puerto Rico, out of an antique shop, and I put the little balances in it so it had the time period dress. And I just didn't want to hang it in the closet. And so I decided that, since I was married to a sea captain and it was an old house, I'd go with the theme of the Ghost and Mrs. Muir. So that's Mrs. So she's Mrs. Muir at the door.
That I have goosebumps, which usually means that's a good idea. Because that's really romantic. I don't think he said that part when I saw it.
Yeah, well, that's the story of the gown at the door.
That's great, because then when you go up to your, one of your upper floors, there's a telescope, right? And you can look out like the sea captain would, because you see the Thames River from your house.
Yeah.
And you can watch the ferries and things go
Well,
up.
when we bought the house, he wanted the top floor, and he made it the bridge, and he said he always wanted his own library and his own room. So he let me decorate all the rest of the house, and I gave him the top floor.
Oh, and here's a picture of right now. This is where we met Connie, the pianist. She was playing this.
Yeah.
Now these are that rug. That's from your family, right? That's
I told you I came from a small country. One of my uncles was a cattle rancher, and so after they would send the cattle off to be butchered, they would keep the skins. And I always loved the medieval period, and so when I started to decorate, they used to have skins on their floors. And so I like them, and then many years later, you see them in Vogue, and you see chairs done in them now, and I was ahead of my time, so.
You are ahead of your time.
Yeah, well.
And you made that border wallpaper, didn't you?
It's not wallpaper, it's fabric.
Or fabric.
Yeah.
Did you make that? Didn't you make that?
No, I bought it.
You bought it? Okay, but didn't you put it up?
Yeah, well, I put it up.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You and Marcus really know how to do these very clever, intricate things that, like I said, to me, makes every part of your house a story, and that's what I enjoy. And you love stories.
I do love stories.
And so your book is a fabulous collection of stories of some of the famous people, right, that have come to your B&B, and plus your life, what happened when you met the monk and your son was healed of epilepsy. Now, what is a monk? What religion is a monk?
Well, they can be many religions.
Oh, they can, okay.
But this particular one was Greek Eastern. Well, he's Eastern Orthodox, which is a kind of a collection of Russian, Syrian, Albanian, Greek, and it's what the Catholic Church was before the schism in the 1100s. So all the services are still very, very old and very traditional, and the men stand on one side and the women on the left, and we could do a whole story on that, but that's
that could be for another show.
Yeah, that's another show.
But well, that's just you've been touched by many people in your life, and I feel like your book is going to touch others because you had to deal with, like you said, an abusive relationship and suicide, and so you just found your way out. How would you say you found your way out of? It must have been a very dark time in your life.
Well, there was, but I also believe in guardian angels, and I think that's part of my story too. Is I've taken a metaphorical character and put her in my book, and she's clairvoyant. And I do have a history of clairvoyance in my family. My aunt was a fortune teller. My grandfather read bones. So it's an interesting family. And then I've known things were going to happen sometimes before they happened. So what I did is I took this character I'm fascinated by homeless people and how they got to be homeless. And so I've interjected this character in the story. So she gives the spiritual lessons that I learned through going through pain and tragedy, and just what we read and what we learn from everything.
Now, because you're such a storyteller, you got very motivated, particularly by women who try to preserve history. Can you tell me about that project, what you're doing to try to help women that want to keep history alive? Or
well, the way that started is I met Marcus, and
Marcus, your husband.
My husband, and moved from Boston to Washington, D.C. And he was going to the Pentagon every day, and I was just shopping in Old Town, and it got boring. So one of my friends said, I can probably get you a part-time job at Mount Vernon. And I said, doing what? And she said, being a historical interpreter. And I said, I don't know a whole lot about history, and so that's probably not a good idea. And she said, no, they'll give you a script, and all you have to do is just study the script. And so I laughed and I interviewed, and sure enough, I got the job. And then I studied a lot. And then the next thing I knew, I was a historical interpreter talking about George Washington and the history of the Revolutionary War. And so by being at Mount Vernon and being in the house, it kind of came to life for me. And one day I was standing out on the plaza, and I was telling a group of people who were waiting to get into the study about how Mount Vernon was saved. And the story goes that a Southern belle was riding her boat down the Potomac River, and she looked up at Mount Vernon, and the portico, if you've ever been there, in the back that overlooks the Potomac, was being held up by ship's masts. And what had happened after George died and the family inherited it, they didn't take care of it. And so it started to fall into disrepair. And so this Southern woman said, we need to preserve it. So they tried to get the government to purchase it, and the government didn't want to buy it. No one was interested in buying it. So
I'm really surprised, but anyway, okay.
We're all surprised.
Right.
And so she writes a letter to her daughter, Anne Pamela Cunningham. And she says, if the men of this country can't do something to preserve this man and his great legacy, then the women will. And so they did what women do, and they got together and they had fundraisers, and they made quilts and baked and sold whatever, and just did a lot to try and preserve Mount Vernon. They got an orator who would go around and give talks, and they collected $200,000 and they bought Mount Vernon. And it became the very first historically preserved property in America.
Wow.
Which I thought was really fascinating.
Yes.
So fast forward, now I meet this wonderful woman, because we lived in Old Town, who turned out to be the former director of the Smithsonian Institute for 28 years. And she was also a historian, and she was writing a book on Anne Pamela Cunningham, who is the lady who preserved the house. So she went to the ladies and asked if she could get some money to help her do the research on the book. And unfortunately, they let her use the library, but they weren't able to give her a grant for any of the thing. And so I thought, how can I help her? Because it's such a fascinating story. And the only thing I really could think of to do was to do a fashion show, because I was in the fashion industry for so many years. And lo and behold, there was a connection, because a lady I used to model for, who's, one of their dresses I'm wearing, she herself and her husband have started a foundation called the Collings Foundation, which is living history. And they do these incredible, they preserve airplanes, and then they have women's clothing from, so they'll bring, like they do the race of the century, and then they have the antique women's clothes with the antique cars and the antique planes, and they do these events,
So they do fashion show fundraisers?
Well, no, they just do history events. But the clothes that she uses are clothes that have been passed down through history. So, so they try to recreate history, if you will. And then she's the president of Alfred Fiandaca, who has been doing clothes forever and doing clothes for famous women. And he, unfortunately, we just lost him this year, but his clothes are timeless and beautiful. So.
Are you wearing something he designed?
Yeah, this was one of his. She sent me a bunch of stuff. She also did Anne Romney's clothes for her campaign. And I brought a few of those if you're interested in looking
Okay, maybe
at some
for
of
next,
those.
if I have, I can come back and we can
But we've
look
got
at that.
some of those. So it's like all these women now are just kind of finding their way into my life, and I'm connecting one with the other. But what I wanted to tell you, and maybe your guess, is that I'm thinking of trying to start something to acknowledge women in history who are doing something now to preserve something in history. Anne, who I told you who's writing this book, was the former Smithsonian director. She's a fabulous woman, and I want to do an event where if anybody out there knows a woman who's done something, we'd like to give her a dress, and also
give her a dress to keep.
To keep, yeah.
Okay, to keep.
One of his one of his dresses. I mean, he dressed Jackie Kennedy, Joan Rivers, now Anne Romney. So, and they're beautiful. They really are. They're timeless. And then just do an awards ceremony that Anne will present an award to these women, just thanking them for keeping history alive, and that's kind of something new I'd like to start. So
okay, so you want people to email you?
If they would, yeah.
Yeah, people like
and nominate someone, or just give me a little background on someone that they may know.
Okay, because like I'm thinking of the regent of DAR. You know, I'm thinking of a couple people because I write a lot of history and I meet a lot of women who are actively working at preserving graveyards and finding out who's buried where, finding out their stories. So. There's Judy Hicks, Janet Purinton. I mean, I'm thinking of a lot of people that invest a lot of their
Lisa Saunders.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that girl.
They spend a lot of their extra time, without pay, trying to preserve history, so people remember who these people are that are buried there. Some, fix their stones. Sea captains' wives who endured a lot when their husbands are out to sea. And one in particular that was just restored, she herself died at sea because she went and kept her husband company while he's rounding Cape Horn and doing all these dangerous
there's just so many. There's just so many fascinating stories.
Right, there are a lot of women in this area that care. So they should just write to you. What's your email address?
It's pcollins0404@hotmail.
Okay. .com. So people can email you any recommendations, or if they
just put in the subject line women in history would help me, because I also have that same one for my bed and breakfast.
Right.
If you want to, if you're as a room reservation request, so I'll be getting.
Now, do you have a lot of people at your bed and breakfast coming because their children are in the Coast Guard, or they have family at the naval base or at the hospital?
Well, like I said, we just opened, so I don't know who we're going to get here.
Because you've been booked already,
I know,
all the time. So is there? Well, I know one was just for a wedding.
One was for a wedding. There were people that were calling for Sailfest, but unfortunately, I was sold out.
Okay.
There was a lady who was showing her daughter Conn College.
Connecticut College.
Yeah, there was someone showing or going to the Coast Guard to visit their son. One man was at the house hunting because the prices in New London are so good.
So Pam, tell me again, who designed your dress again? What was that name?
Alfred Fiandaca from Boston.
How do you spell that last name?
Fiandaca.
Is this something when I saw The Devil Wears Prada, I just got such a kick out of that movie with Meryl Streep, all about the fashion magazine. Is that anything like real life, do you think?
Not with Alfred, but there were some designers in New York that, absolutely. When you walk in front of someone, they will do, you have to have a pretty strong sense of self, because they will tell you everything that's wrong with you.
Now, did you have a modeling career? Would you have to face that, or people would yell at you, or say you're too this, too that, stand this way, stand that way?
Yeah, but I did more runway than I did print. It's a whole different thing.
Oh, so that's how you know how to do that fancy standing.
Yeah.
All right, so show us this dress. This would be a dress that you would have at the fashion fundraiser where you're raising money for funds for women who want to write about history or preserve history, and you're trying to help them.
Well, the event it's an event. It's not really to sell clothes to make money because if we sell the clothes, it's going to the lady or the designer.
Right.
But the clothes are so beautiful. It's like going to a show or just an event.
It's like going to theater.
Yeah, it's
really.
It's a beautiful. They're beautiful shows, and he's got beautiful clothes. And I mean, he's famous. He's just.
And he designed again. Tell me again who he designed for. Like
Joan Kennedy, Joan Rivers, Jackie Kennedy, and this was worn by Ann Romney. He did a whole series for her for her campaign.
So let's stand up. Let me see it. Let me see. Okay. And
hers was red. Mine is blue because I've gained a little weight. Menopause showed up.
You look great. Are you kidding me?
They sent me a bunch of size 4s, but this.
So how do you do this? So that's what you would do for runway. You would turn around and do things like that.
Yep. And then just you know.
do that. You put your hands different ways. Wow, you're so good. You've got those moves. So you women would be wearing these clothes in this event where people.
Well, I'll get professional models, and it'll be a tea room, and there'll be music, and there'll be lights, and it'll be like what you see on television.
Like on a movie, like I'm watching. Because I never have been to a fashion show.
Well, then we need to get you to one.
I know, especially since it's for a good cause.
It's for a very good cause. Yeah.
So I can't wait to submit some names of women that I feel have done a lot of work to preserve history.
Yeah, I would really like to. Make this be the first one, and of course the funds will go to Anne to help her for her book. And then if it's a success and people like it, then we can do that for somebody else next year who's needing money. If someone's restoring an old boat and they need capital, then we'll do another event.
So anything like if it's toward history, that's something that you might be willing to do this for.
Yeah, just women,
great.
Just women helping women.
Right. Well, you are. I find you a good friend. You're always promoting my book, telling everybody they have to read Mystic Seafarer's
Well, they
Trip.
do. It's a great, great book.
And you promoted our friend Suzanne. I mean, she's a fabulous editor and film crew. And
she is.
So I just appreciate you. I appreciate your passion for helping women for whatever it is they're trying to do, and especially your interest in history, since I like history too. Okay. Now, I saw the video done on your book, which was phenomenal. Didn't you say who did that video for you?
My son, actually, who lives in Nashville, did it for me, and I think it's a fascinating way to sell a book, but it's a trailer, like a movie trailer.
I loved it. I thought
think
it was
it's
well
really
done.
cool,
It's very few words, but the images took me through the story of your life and how you found this new direction. And I can't wait to read it.
Well, if anyone out there wants to read a really good book by a wonderful editor, then it's The Innkeeper's Diary. It's on YouTube, and it's only like 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah, so if they look up Innkeeper's Diary on YouTube, they'll be able to find it, right?
And it starts out, there's some other ones, but they're scary movies, The Innkeeper or something like that. So make sure you use the word diary, and it'll start out with, you'll see it, I think it's the first one that shows up if you type in diary.
And will it say Innkeeper's Diary by Pam Collins, right?
At the end it does,
At the end it does. But anyway, I look forward to your book coming out. Will you list it at least on your bed and breakfast website when it comes out, author of, so just people can keep in touch with you when your book comes out?
Yeah, I need to find a really good IT person to get me up and going, because I'm still kind of old and learning how to use my television set. But.
Well, anyway, Pam, thanks so much for coming on my show. I can't wait to read your book.
I love you.
I can't wait to come to your fashion show. And thank you for teaching me. I will not get up and stand here and show you what you taught me, because I just can't stop giggling.
You should.
Because I just can't be as fancy as you are. But I love watching you do your stuff. so thank you so much for coming to watch the Lisa Saunders Show, and I will see you next week.